Welcome back, episode 56 of Cutoffs and Coffee. James, CT here, as always, in our cutoffs with our coffee, representing T3 Performance. Today on the episode, we have an absolute banger. We have Coach Lachen Reid. He is the strength coach at Gustavus Adolphus College, as well as Velocity Training Center, based out of Minnesota. He comes from the Jake Tuura and Austin Jochum camp, who, if you are familiar with the show at all, you've heard them on our podcast, and he kind of blends their work and takes it and does his own thing with it. And we have a really great conversation. A lot of it's based around speed training, how to get faster at not only what we're doing with our sprints, the distance, the times, the resistance that we use our sprints when we're out of the weight room, but also what we do in the weight room and what we can do to improve speed in the weight room with weights and jumps and squats and deadlifts and all those kind of things. We actually start the episode by talking about and taking a deep dive into awesome ways to warm up your teams. If you are coaching a team setting, this is going to give you some really cool ideas of thinking outside the box. We kind of refer to it as red pill warm-ups, and coach gives us a lot of great stories from his red pill warm-ups and tells us how he warms his groups up and how he warms himself up. And we also talk a lot about the philosophy of training, how we can train with some intent. And being someone right now who is not currently studying exercise science, but is studying philosophy and religion, he's got a great perspective on how we can blend those thoughts and ideas from that into training. I know you're going to love listening to this episode.
And season 3, we're kicking it off, right? And if you have been listening and you haven't gotten your Cutoffs and Coffee gear yet, you got to hit CT up. You got to cut your own sleeves off. You know how it works, right? It's only a cutoff if you do it, right? So hit CT up for Cutoffs and Coffee gear. We got our t-shirts, we got our hats, all right, as we enter into season 3. And if you were with us for 1 and 2 and don't have gear, you got to get some. Represent the brand, represent Cutoffs and Coffee.
If you appreciate what we're doing on the show, please support us by subscribing on Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube for the video version. It's always better watching and listening on the video version on YouTube. So we appreciate all that. Share this with your friends. If people need to hear some of the stuff that we're talking about, please share it and reach out to us. If you have people who you want to hear on, some coaches or high performers you look up to and you'd like us to talk to, please reach out and let us know. We'll try our best to get them on the show. So thank you again for tuning in to episode 56 of Cutoffs and Coffee. Here it is with Coach Lachen Reid. Enjoy. Coach Lachen Reid, welcome to the show, man. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I just got through a blizzard, so it was a little late coming here, but I'm doing well now.
Not everybody is willing to drive through a blizzard just to be on the Cutoffs and Coffee podcast. Let's just say that was priority number 1. You probably had some other stuff going on, but we'll just say priority number 1 was getting on the pod, man. Yeah. How are winters in Minnesota? I can't imagine they're too great to be a part of.
Yeah, they're tough. So they last a long time. It's pretty much at least Thanksgiving, but usually before Thanksgiving all the way through March at the latest. So it's a long winter to start. It gets cold. Once we get past Christmas, we start getting down into -10, -15 degrees Fahrenheit at the worst. And then we get the snow as well, like the snow on top of it. But we kind of like it here. You get a little pride driving through it. Like not everyone can say they lived through a winter like this. And it just makes you think about people in the past. Like, how'd you live through this before you get in a car, takes wherever you want. You have heated rooms. You can sleep in a cozy house. But yeah, it's hard. It's not fun all the time, but it makes you kind of proud to live here. So I like it.
Do you guys think everybody else is soft? Like when you see certain weather fronts come in and people complain about, are you like, bro, you guys are so soft. Like y'all need to come to Minnesota.
all in other states, like in the South or something.
Yeah. Or you see, huge blizzard, 2 inches of snow, canceled school, all these places. And you're like, come on, man.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, because we're used to it here. So we have snow plows and shovels and salt, and we know how to deal with it. But then I think was it like Texas a few years ago where it actually got really cold and snowy and houses just broke because the houses weren't built for it. So you kind of get it because other places just aren't as used to it. But yeah, you see someone complaining that it's 20, 30 degrees Fahrenheit. It's that's just not cold, man. Just put it on a jacket, you're fine.
Suck it up. Yeah, or don't put on a jacket. Just
that too.
The whole state of Texas shut down because of 2 inches of snow is what happened. Right. Pipelines froze. It was wild. But in Cleveland, it's 15 degrees on Monday. By Thursday, it's 70 again. So it's very weird.
Yeah.
But I've been watching Life Below Zero, which takes place in Alaska. But I didn't realize that, like, in the continental United States, that there were places that would just consistently be in the negatives.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Right now, it was a little warmer last week, which was nice. It's like 20s, 30s, but yeah, we'll dive back down now. So just how it is.
Well, I think I was actually in Oklahoma City when all that stuff was going on in Texas. So we got some action in Oklahoma. We were stuck in a hotel for 3 days. We were supposed to have like catered food I was doing some work out there. No catering for 3 days. So I was good. I'm like, oh, I'll just fast. Like, it's all good. I got other dudes running around, pulling their hair out, no idea what to do, but no snow plows, no shovels. They had no clue what to do. It was wild.
Right.
But hopefully they figured that out. Well, so let's I guess not start, but secondary here. Now that we know, Minnesota, maybe that's the answer to this question, but what's something that we need to know about you that we can't find from a quick Instagram or Google search?
Yeah. So my Instagram is all training. It's all in the weight room. It's all sprinting. It's all that kind of stuff. If you Google me, it's all hockey because I played hockey growing up. So it's just all my random hockey statistics. But outside of that, my main interests outside of training I'm studying English and religion in college right now. So people think I'm studying like, kinesiology, exercise science, that kind of thing. And I started, like, that was my initial plan. I was going to do English and exercise science. I took a couple exercise science classes and I just didn't like them to start. I thought I could just teach myself at all. Like, I took an anatomy class and I'm like, man, I can just read a textbook. I can teach this to myself. But if I'm taking classes like English or literature or religion, philosophy, like I think it's harder to teach yourself because you kind of need people smarter than you to kind of help you work through the ideas. We can get to this later on, just like how I see the use for religion, for philosophy, for like thinking in that kind of paradigm compared to just thinking mechanically, thinking about muscles, tissues, nervous system. Like, there's a lot of benefit for a coach to look at multiple fields that relate more to broader systems, partly because they just have more people to draw from. Like, you think about something like weightlifting, sprinting, like maybe 100 years, 150 years or so, we got like research, we got thinking. Philosophy, like, that's all time, that's all people. So you just got more to draw from, you got more ideas there. So I think that's just something that makes me a little bit different from most coaches, in that my background and my interests are really not connected to, on like a literal physical level, are really not connected to what I'm doing for my work right now. So yeah, that's kind of the thing.
Dude, that's such a good point. I feel like I don't want to say the best coaches, but maybe the most passionate coaches seem to be ones who didn't study it or don't have a master's in it or don't have, all this continuing edge. They're just like former athletes who trained a ton and then got a group of, and James and I have similar stories, like just got a group of dudes together to throw down and have a great time and love the energy and love the vibe of it and love how it made them feel and love how the relationships were built through the weight room, and then are now kind of giving that back. And I almost hear more and more often that people are kind of getting away from studying it because, like you said, you can teach it yourself. You can learn it all. Or you go to YouTube, you listen to a couple podcasts, you can train some people. So that's a really cool take. Yeah, and we'll definitely dive into the philosophy of that. How about second question? What's the last skill you taught yourself or something you're currently working on?
So I'd say last skill this is more in the summer. I was working on some gymnastics work, mainly front flips. I just got like really obsessed with that. I think CT, you were doing that. Those are off the wall. Those are sweet. I got to try that one next. Yeah. I need some mats for that. That's the thing. Because at the school that I'm at, there's like a pole vault pit. So I would just go in there and just put some mats down, and just try and do front flips. Like, that was my warm up every single day for months. And I got it down eventually. I could do them on flat ground now, which is pretty fun. So that was a skill. Like, that was partly because I wanted to do front flips, but also like, the skill acquisition process, trying to figure out like, how do I teach myself a new skill? All things come along with that. And then outside of that, kind of obvious for my Instagram, but just sprinting, just been really into like pushing speed work and trying to figure out how to make myself faster. And then based off what I find there, bring that to my athletes I work with. So probably it was front flips. Now we're kind of into sprinting and max speed. So yeah.
Sick. Yeah. And we'll definitely dive into that sprint stuff. Well, tell us your story, man. We, told us a little bit about the hockey background, a little bit about how, you're in school studying for, a religion and philosophy, and now you're training. Kind of fill in some of the gaps there so our listeners, understand and can, like feel where you're coming from for the rest of the conversation here, and let us know, as hosts, how you got to the place that you're in now.
Yeah, for sure. So growing up, hockey was my life. Like that was everything I cared about. And so probably like literally from second grade all the way basically through high school, like that was just all I cared about. So I got into training for that to get better at hockey. And the first coach who really like got me into training and like basically showing me how to train, because so his name was Jack Blatherwick, and he was the strength coach for like the Miracle on Ice team, like the 1980 Herb Brooks team. Like he was their strength coach. And so he's in Minnesota now. So he was running training sessions for hockey players in Minneapolis. And I just got involved with him, working with him, and kind of figured out like what you actually do for training. Because up until that point, it was pretty much just like figure out something hard I can do and just do it. Like I would run, I would do push-ups. Like there's a lot of great stuff, but it's like I had no idea what I was doing. There was no kind of like thought. It was just do something hard that should work. That should do something. And so through Blatherwick, I figured out kind of the basics of training. Like you should do jumps, you should do single leg strength, you should mimic skating stride positions to get better at that position. But then also he showed me that you can be a strength coach. Like you can do this as a job. You can help athletes improve. You can like, this is going to just be your life. And like that kind of stuck with me because I trained with him through like early high school. And as I got further through hockey, I just kind of stopped enjoying it. Honestly, like I got a lot more invested in the training. I always noticed for myself that I enjoyed the training the most. I enjoyed practice the next, and then I enjoyed games the least. And like, that's not really a great way to be going through sports. And so through high school, I was really interested in strength and conditioning and training and coaching. So I would listen to podcasts, read books, talk to coaches. I kind of knew that's what I wanted to do. And then after high school, stopped playing hockey, went to University of Minnesota for one semester. And that was like the COVID year. Like that was like the year after COVID. So fall semester was terrible. Like there was nothing open, you're masked all the time, you got online classes. And I had just like stopped playing hockey. So I had basically no life. It was not a good spot for me. And so I transferred to Gustavus Adolphus College, kind of figured things out, like got into better classes, started like training better, started figuring out what I was doing. And then over the next summer, I interned for Austin Jochum, who you guys know through Instagram podcasts. So I connected to him through Jake Tuura. We were kind of friends from lifting, worked for Jochum, had an awesome experience with him. That really changed how I thought about training, how I thought about working with athletes, but also just life in general. Through Jochum, I got connected with the Gustavus soccer player who was training with Jochum. And so then through him, talked to the Gustavus soccer coach, got hired as their strength and conditioning coach. And then that fall, I also talked to the men's hockey coach at Gustavus, got hired to be their strength coach. So now at Gustavus, I'm strength coach for men's hockey and men's soccer. So that's, it's pretty fun. I like working with them. And then it also gives me a lot of opportunities to implement the things I've been trying out with training. Then outside of work at Gustavus, I'm working at Velocity Hockey Center in Edina, Minnesota with Nathan Welty. So I'm his assistant coach here, and this is all hockey groups. And that's kind of like my niche, because that's what I grew up with. So I know a lot more about that. With soccer, that's been a big learning curve for me because I played really bad soccer growing up. So I understand how the sport works, but beyond like how many players are on the field and like the objective of the game, I really didn't know anything about it. So I really try to teach myself a lot about the tactics, the skill, the mental side, try to figure out what goes into being a good soccer player. So right now, my two biggest populations, soccer and hockey. And then at Velocity, we have basically from like middle schoolers all the way through professional NHL players. So it's a really big group we work with here. Yeah, that's kind of like my coaching journey. It's kind of how I got here. So, and now I'm here today. So, yeah.
Awesome, man. As you kind of, navigated your athletic career, your training career, you mentioned that, you always enjoyed training the most. And, in my experience, what I've seen is the athletes who become strength coaches who enjoy training the most often miss the boat on what training is supposed to do for us in the performance side. We end up chasing numbers instead of chasing movement patterns or improving our skill acquisition or aligning our training program with what we do on the field. Did you have a paradigm shifting moment that allowed you to do the work you do now, as opposed to what a traditional perception of a strength coach might be?
Yeah, for sure. Had a couple. So I was definitely a little bit in that boat you described earlier, kind of just chasing numbers, trying to be a weight room warrior and kind of like forget what we're training for. And I think definitely at times that's a great mindset to be in, maybe for a more developing athlete, someone who just is not physically there. Like you maybe just need to get into that for a while. One coach who was a big mentor for me growing up, his name's Clance Layler. He's a coach in York, Ontario. He has a gym there, and his gym, it's simple. It's a turf strip down the middle and then squat racks down both sides. And so at his gym, you snatch, you clean, you squat, and you sprint. And it's like, for some kids, that's a really good program because you just get strong and you sprint a lot. And so that was kind of like my thinking for a while. Then kind of partly through Jochum, probably through working with him, that's when I kind of had that shift of, okay, maybe this isn't everything. Like maybe just because we can boost our squat and do a bunch of sprints, maybe we're kind of missing some pieces here. And then when I was thinking about things to talk about here today, I was thinking about this podcast I was on with, it was like that roundtable podcast with Jochum. It was like Jochum, Tuura, Will Rattel, and then Kendrick Pratt from, he's at Elon. It's like Elon, yeah. And then we're just talking about
that was a great one to listen
to. Yeah. That one. That was funny. We went to just we like played pickup basketball for like 3 hours, got Chipotle, and then went to my high school gym because I had the key for it. And we just recorded a podcast in my old high school gym. It was
yeah, it sounded like some of the dudes were like sitting 10 feet behind the mic.
Yeah,
the guys it was
just on Jochum's computer.
So
we were like sitting on benches and plyo boxes around his computer. So yeah.
It was awesome.
And so on that podcast, I remember I said something along the lines of, I don't think training really can make you better at sports. So you probably just need to like do your sport. And like at the time, that's kind of what I thought. And then after reflecting on that for a while, doing more work, doing more research, working with teams, I was like, man, at that point I was 19 years old. I was like, so I'm 19 and this is what I'm going to do for probably, this is what I'm thinking to do the rest of my life. And I don't think it matters or that it works. Like one, that's lazy. Two, that's pathetic. Like seriously, this is what you want to do and you don't think it matters? Like figure it out. So I was at that point, and that's what I was saying. Like we just need to do like games and like figure out scenarios that kind of like can actually apply to the sport or just play your sport, and then maybe train just so you can try and avoid injury. But then after working with soccer, I was like, man, there's got to be more. Like we got to actually like make this team better because we can do that. Like I think that's possible. And so kind of two ways that I've been approaching that lately. One has been the speed training because I think we have seen some good results. Like, yeah, a laser time sprint is not the same speed you're going to see in a game, but I think just pushing that max output, that potential, I think that's useful. So I think that's one thing I'm working on is like we can make athletes faster just in a linear fashion and curvilinear runs, lateral runs. Like we do other things too, but it's just speed. We can do that. That's one thing we can do. And then two, opponent manipulation. That's kind of what I call anything that's not your individual output. It's something where you're working against or with other people. So with opponent manipulation, I think about it, there's direct and there's indirect. Direct is I'm trying to move you. Like or maybe it's like a sumo wrestling ring. Like I'm trying to push you over. I'm trying to use my body to move your body. Indirect, that's juking and cutting, faking. Then you can think like deception, lying, tricking. It's trying to make you go somewhere you don't want to go. So right now, I would say those are kind of like my two physical buckets. It's like we're trying to get faster. We're trying to make opponents do what they don't want to do, what they shouldn't do. And then beyond that, beyond the physical side, that's kind of like the mental side that I really like working with. That's creating sessions that are competitive, intense, that kind of mimic the mental qualities you want to see in a game. And I mean, this is nothing we can get to later on. I think I was just like brainstorming earlier, but I think we can make sessions a lot more similar to competition in their competitive sense. Like in every single workout, I think we should try and break something. Like we should try and break a med ball. We should try and do an overcoming iso and just break the rack. That's a funny story about that later. But I think we can create a lot more competition and intensity in sessions that if you use it before your actual sport practice can kind of potentiate the attitude and intensity going into practice, which is what we do with soccer. We train before practice. We do like 15 minutes of just like really high output work. And then we go on the field and like for the guys who are into it, probably like 95% of the team, like they're on it right away. I think that's just been a good way to kind of mirror training and sport practice. So that's kind of like my paradigm story. It's like training matters. We just need to squat heavy. Training doesn't matter. Play your sport. Now let's make training matter, figure it out, find an answer. So
Yeah, man. And that's an incredible like mental journey from a standpoint of like, if we don't reflect on what we're doing, we won't reach a next level. And I think you explained that perfectly in terms of like how we as coaches need to be looking at what we're doing to level up the athletes who are our responsibility to help. And I've definitely gone through that. Like everything matters, nothing matters. Okay, where do we fall? And being able to go through that, learning new skills has been a huge part of that. And you know, I saw you swinging a wiffle ball bat, lefty.
Yeah.
Great swing, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Huge baseball guy. Where did you start incorporating those type of red pill warmups, we could call them? And outside of that wiffle ball that I saw, what are some of the other ones that like you go to fire the kids up, to get that competitive environment, to hear the laughter in the gym?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a couple of weeks ago, actually, we just talked with on Jake Tuura's podcast with Jochum and Welty. We basically went over the same thing, like warm-ups and how we think about them. So I kind of give similar ideas there. So the first thing we talked about was kind of what was our initial idea with warm-ups, like what was my first kind of warm-up. And since I'm like still young, and so when I was growing up in training, the way I taught myself was like listening to Joel Smith's podcast and Jochum's podcast. So I kind of like grew up in that chaotic warm-up style. I never really had you need to do this set warm-up. It was more of, I kind of had that organic dimension going in. But so now what I do with a warm-up, more in off season, let's just start with off season, because that's where I'm in right now with soccer and hockey too, who are home for break. So my main goal with a warm-up is to make them as loud as possible and to make them very uncomfortable and like in a new environment. So I think from the mental side first, and then there's physical components as well. But the main goal is make someone yell really loud, make someone fall over, and like just get people fired up. So ways we do that, kind of what I talked about, like that opponent manipulation stuff, any kind of thing where you're like competing against someone else. One thing I like a lot, doing like line pushes. So just we got all kinds of lines on a basketball court in a gym. Just stand shoulder to shoulder with the guy on the line, try and push him over. That's a really simple one. You can do hands on shoulders, you can do back to back, you can do anything like that. So just really simple, one person versus one person, win the battle. I love using those kinds of things. As for bigger games, I love doing any kind of like tag, any kind of just chaotic, free flowing tag where it's just a confined area. Maybe it's like a flag pull. Maybe it's you only have one arm, you got to tag someone else with only one arm. That's kind of what I did last night with a younger group. With soccer, when I'm back at school, let's see what we usually do. I love playing games with them. We'll do any kind of ultimate game. Ultimate medicine ball is an excellent game. It's ultimate frisbee with like a 8 to 10 pound medicine ball, and it just makes the game. It makes it faster, which is weird. You would think it makes it slower, but you can only pass it like 5 feet at a time. So you got to be pass. You got to be really thinking quickly so you can actually move the ball down and try and score. So I love ultimate games because ultimate games rely on your teammates moving around. Yeah, those are kind of the main ones. Just playing games, trying to work against people, but also think about the goal is to create a really just fired up atmosphere. And so whatever that is for your group, like that's probably going to work. So yeah, that's kind of the main things I go do there.
I know James and I had some of these conversations as we've been kind of developing these different type of warm-ups as well. And at the gym, it's a bit easier, but then I go to in a college setting and I try to do similar things in a college setting, and it's a bit different, right? Coaches kind of look at you a little differently, or you might not have the space. So you get a whole, men's basketball team of 24 athletes who are all 6'6", and you get them in like a 6 by 6 foot area, and you got them pushing each other around and doing all these things. What are the conversations like with the athletes in the team setting and the coaches in the team setting as you are trying to get them into these competitive type environments for these warm-ups before you train?
Yeah, at least for the coaches I work with, they have not had any issues with that. They've loved it, honestly. So for hockey, initially before I came to the team, one of their assistant coaches was their strength coach, and now I kind of work with him doing the strength and conditioning program. So and he has great ideas too. So one thing we were playing this tag game. It was just 1v1 tag. We just put a bunch of obstacles in the middle. It's like probably like a 20 by 20 yard square with like folding chairs and tables and random stuff in the middle of the arena. And we had our hockey guys just going like full speed 1v1 tag, and they're jumping. It was they're like jumping over tables, through chairs. Like maybe it was a little too much. But in the gym we're in, it's a weird setup. So in the gym, there's windows on the wall behind one of the hoops that go into the athletic offices. So all the coaches, other teams' coaches, like they just look out their window and they see the basketball court. And our guys were just screaming so loud. Like they're just like yelling at each other the whole time. So we have coaches like looking out the window, like, what the hell is going on down there? Yeah. So that was a funny story of if you can make other coaches look at you like, what the hell are you doing? Like probably onto something there.
Right.
But yeah, with athletes, I mean, because I mean, college kids want to play. Like college kids are there for the most part to have fun. Like I work with D3 teams. Like it's serious, it's intense, but also like these kids want to have fun. So if you just tell them like we're gonna play a game, you're gonna get 80% of them on your side. You're gonna get 10% who don't care, and you get 10% who are way too serious and maybe need to loosen up a little bit and actually be exposed to some like unpredictable environments. So with that 10% who don't care, some might just be a losing battle. Some just might not have the mindset or the attitude that's going to put them in the spot that you want them to be in. But you can offer alternatives. I was talking about this on that podcast as well. Is if you have an athlete who doesn't want to be there, who doesn't really care, or doesn't want to do a game, maybe they're scared of getting injured, which whole other conversation. But I was saying you can offer them something they do care about, because if you're a college athlete, I like to think you probably care about something physical. Maybe it's just your sport. Maybe it's a certain quality. Maybe you want to be faster, stronger, you have something like that, or it's just your sport. So maybe I'll offer, we're gonna do this game, we're gonna do this warm up with these, whatever, we're doing something crazy. The alternative is if you're a guy who wants to get faster, do this speed workout. Go sled push, go hurdle hop, go line hop, then go 10-yard constraint sprint. Do that for 10 minutes. We'll meet you in the weight room after that. So that's one thing you can do, just offer an alternative. And then for the group who is way too serious about it, you can have a conversation, because if they're too serious about it, they probably are thinking a little too much. So ask them like, why does this not fit with your goals? And then you can have that conversation. What we're having right now is, so even though this is not a structured warm-up that targets every single tissue and activates your nervous system and gets your blood temperature up, it actually does all of those things just in a much less organized environment, which is actually a good thing, because when you're playing a sport, there's some organization, you know what team you're on, you know what the rules of the game are. Beyond that, like you don't really know what the hell's going on. Like there could be anything. Your opponent could come at you in a way you cannot predict. And so we're trying to train that quality, that unpredictable, chaotic quality, in a different environment without the context of your sports skill, your sports concepts. So it's really just be honest, be open with your athletes, and connect to them, figure out what they care about, and then kind of go from there. For coaches, I really haven't had to deal with coaches who aren't into it, and if they're not honestly saying thing, talk to them, be a person, explain what you're doing, figure out what they care about, and kind of go from there. So, yeah.
I think
great point.
That brings up a huge point, is like, we would much rather not have that conversation and just internalize that coach doesn't like us. I don't want to go talk to him. Like, he just thinks I'm bad. He's terrible. Right. As opposed to like, let's just talk to the dude, or let's just talk to the female coach about why we're doing these things. And then we make more friends. I think that's, a huge part. The communication aspect is what I love about what you're describing in these warm-up settings, is getting kids talking to each other and making friends through those warm-ups and creating stronger bonds. Do you get the opportunity to go watch your teams play and see some of the fruit of their labors in the off season, and see that kind of play into the sports?
Yeah, absolutely. So I travel with the teams. I go to a lot of the soccer practices, because we do a lot of outdoor work as well. So we'll do like an outdoor workout into practice. I'll just be there for that. Hockey, I practice less, but I see their games, so I see kind of what we're doing. But yeah, I have a good story about that. So last spring, our hockey off season, we have like 8 weeks of training. We have a really good block. We only have training. There's no ice on campus in the spring, so they literally just train. So we have hour and a half plus each day to work. And we had one athlete who he's on the team, so he's a good athlete. He played a bit. He probably played like half the games or so. So he's in and out of the lineup. And we were playing handball. The guys just they loved handball. And he just became the leader of his team. Like he was yelling out plays. He was so vocal and just loud and encouraging. And he was so into the game, and he was playing great too, like in handball. And like that was cool to see, because he wasn't a more He wasn't like that on the ice. He wasn't as loud, as intense, as good on the ice. In handball, he's really expressing that quality, that leadership quality. It's like, okay, there's something there. We can tap into that. And then he's a Minneapolis guy as well. So over the summer, I just have some small group training. He was at the small group training as well. And so he was consistent with that a ton. So he was there all summer. I had him for the entire summer as well. And we did the similar kind of training that I talked about earlier, that opponent manipulation work, doing all kinds of 1v1 battle drills, because that's what hockey is like. That's a video I can send you that might be a good post with this show of some things I was talking about and showing with how you can mimic hockey battle situations into off-ice training. And so he was just doing that all summer. And then he comes in to the fall this year, and I think he's played almost every game. And I'm not like, obviously it's not a one-to-one correlation. Like, he was also skating over the summer. He also played hockey over the summer, but he is more confident. He's more competent. He's more willing to go into battles in the corner. And it's just cool to see. Like, it's obviously you can't prove this training caused this output, but there's definitely correlation. And so that's one fun example. Then for soccer, kind of similar thing. I had a couple of guys who I could train with over the summer because they're Minneapolis guys. And it made big strides. Guys who were kind of same thing, out of the lineup, training a ton over the summer. Soccer has this weird culture of no one works out. Like, at least where I am. Like, most of the guys on the team, the first time they were like seriously in a weight room was with our team. And so that's a fun opportunity for me, in that they don't have any preconceptions of what training is. They don't have an idea of what they like and don't like. Where with hockey, like, hockey players lift, so they know what they're doing, but also they know what they want to do. And so with soccer, you kind of build a new idea with them of what training is. So a couple guys had really good progress over the summer, coming into the season, getting the lineup. They're just stronger than people. And like that in soccer, that works apparently, because no one else does that. And so that was great to see, that just guys training really hard over the summer, getting the physical situation on the field, and they're just more effective. So yeah, we're seeing with the teams that I work with on the field and on the ice, that's so huge for me. Like, I make a point to try to see them play as much as possible, because if I'm watching a game, like, I'm seeing, okay, I see that interaction, I see that expression. How can I make that better? How can I improve that away from the sport? Is that like a physical thing? Is that a mental thing? Is that strength? Is that speed? Like, I got to figure out something to improve that interaction. And so I think just seeing the comparison between training and actual performance, like, if you're working with a team and you're not really watching them play, I think you could be missing out. Like, there are definitely things in there that you will not see in a handball game or even in the weight room. So yeah, I love watching the teams play for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. My only issue that I have with soccer guys is they always think after 2 days in the weight room, they're going to get too bulky and they're not going to end up looking like Cristiano Ronaldo. I'm like, guys, it's taking y'all 22 years to look like this. Trust me, like 4 training sessions, you're not going to bulk up. The other thought,
Ronaldo's back too. I don't know what we're talking about. Like, Ronaldo is like, what?
I know, right? But maybe that's bulky to them, or that's like, I don't know. We haven't gotten into that too much. The other thing I keep thinking about that makes me laugh is you said, there's that 10% of the athletes in those games, and we see it too, right? Who just don't want to do it because they're afraid they'll get hurt. I think those are the same people who end up growing up and being superintendents who cancel school when there's 2 inches of snow on the ground. It's like, I think those are the same things, but we'll move on from that. We talked about speed. We had talked about how you're really diving into getting faster and getting those numbers down. And we know that there's, like you had mentioned, there's that number may not directly correlate to what's going on the field or on the court, but it also is pretty cool for the athletes to be able to see. And it definitely keeps them coming back if that flying 10 number or that 40 number keeps going down, right? And they see themselves and feel themselves getting faster to this subjective number. I want to dive in a bit to how you train for speed. We'll start with, out of the weight room and then kind of work our way into the weight room. I also feel like there seem to be 2 different, classes or stances. Some coaches think nothing in the weight room can get you fast. The only way you can get fast is by sprinting. And then some coaches think the only way to get faster is by doing weight room strength training. And you do an awesome job of blending them. So I would love to get your take on what you've been doing to train for speed, first on the track and outside of the weight room, And then let's transition a little bit to the super fast, co-contraction stuff that and the banded jumps and all that kind of stuff that you've been doing in the weight room. So let's start outside of the weight room. What does speed training look like to you and your athletes outside the weight room? And what are some of your takes on that?
Yeah. So just do a speed session.
Sorry, that's big. That's a big, I mean, that's
we can do
wide
that.
question. So
Yeah.
narrow that down as much as you want.
Sure. Okay. So it's pretty similar both for like me and my own training versus the athlete's training. Just with my own, it's probably going to be more because I have more time. So what we'll do some kind of warm up, like I said. With my own training, it's usually just going to be spike ball because my friends and I love that. So we'll play a half hour of spike ball. With my athletes, it's usually something a little more with a little more movement because honestly, spike ball, you don't move that much. Just kind of like a little bit of lateral shuffling. So some kind of warm up, just get everyone going. And then a few build up sprints. I'll either just do like straight up, go just 50-yard build up sprints, go a few of those just to get some actual running in. Or I'll do some kind of race. Maybe it's like a tennis ball drop sprint between two people. Maybe it's a reaction sprint. Something I thought of earlier, just doing like foam roller knockovers, like just set up 2 foam rollers and just knock them over. Like that's just really satisfying to people. It's just so fun to just punch it over. So just more incentive to run faster. So something like that. So competitive warm up, some kind of race, or just build up sprints. And then usually we'll either do acceleration work or top speed work. With acceleration work, we have laser timers. We have these old Brower timers that work most of the time. It's funny when someone runs fast, like they think this, oh, that was so good. It's like, sorry, I didn't get it.
Didn't get it yet.
That's the worst. So we'll do acceleration work. With accelerations, I love doing sled contrast. Maybe we'll probably do some without the sled, maybe like 3, 4, 5 sprints, maybe like 20 yards or less without a sled, and then start doing I like sled pulls to get your upper body going more. So like sled pull contrast is great. I love doing those. And then for top speed work, that's the top speed work is like the closest it can get to like just sprint to get faster, because it's pretty much just do flying 10s with a set build until either you drop off or until we're out of time and we need to go to the weight room. So for the actual speed work like that, it is pretty much just sprint to get faster. And then there's been things I've been trying to work in, like there's things like pairing with plyometrics. Like, okay, if we pair a sprint with like a short ground contact plyometric, does that make some athletes faster, some slower? Because maybe depending on how you sprint, like what really like primes you for a sprint, versus if we do an acceleration with like a really heavy sled push, like a sled push with 10 plates on it, and then your acceleration, does that make you faster or slower? What does that tell us? Maybe you're lacking strength or something like that. So maybe we do something like that, or we do an acceleration wall push, which is kind of like your hands on a wall and then try to get down to your acceleration position and just try and drive your big toe through the ground, your rear foot. So it's the same idea as a heavy sled push, just overcoming isometric. So we'll do things like that with acceleration. With top speed work, I really haven't found anything worthwhile to actually pair it with beyond just like time fillers, like mobility or like really easy plyos. Things like line hops where you just going back and forth over a line as fast as possible. Those are fun. Like I think those are great training that you can maybe implement more in your session, but at least to pair with a top speed sprint, I think for the most part, you're probably just better off resting and just actually doing the sprint. So yeah, the actual speed work away from the weight room, it's pretty bare bones, pretty simple. It's just make it competitive. I love Tony Holler's Feed the Cats, like just make it as competitive as possible. Every time we do sprints, I'm recording all the numbers. And after the workout, I send it out in our team group chat, just the ranking. And then after each week, I'll take the ranking of, we usually do like 2 sprints, some kind of jump, and maybe, I don't know, a strength test. And I'll rank everyone for each test, take the average of each position. So it's like if you get 3rd in the sprint, 2nd in the sprint, 1st in the jump, 3rd in the strength, then whatever your average is, we do a super score of lowest average wins. And I just send that out in the group chat to kind of make it more competitive. So you have something to work for each week. So that's pretty fun. But yeah, speed work's pretty simple. It's just basically sprint. And then the things I mentioned kind of sprinkled throughout.
I'll see a lot of stuff that'll say, 15 flying 10s, 20, 15-yard sprints and things like that. And, a lot of people think that's a ton of volume, too much volume, but you're tracking every rep. So you're able to see the outputs, right? You're able to see that athletes are still moving fast and not fatiguing at all. At what point do you decide, okay, we've dropped off enough to be able to move on, or we've dropped off enough to where we're not getting much out of it? What does that look like for you, especially in that group setting, right?
Yeah.
Where you have athletes who might be getting faster. I know some of my fastest times have come 12, 13, 14 sprints in.
Yeah.
And every time I do that, I think, well, I would have usually cut it off after 5. I'm glad I went, I'm glad I had more time, right, to where that I was trying to kill, that I ran 15 of them. So what do you use to decide when it's time to cut that off and move on? Because I know you do similar with strength sets and reps, right? You just kind of wait till you had a post that said until you get an emotional response, right? Squat until an emotional response.
Train till your hamstrings rip. That was my favorite one.
Oh yeah, that's good.
That was great.
So what are some of those things? So, talking to athletes, just stop when you tear a hamstring.
Sure.
What do those look like for you as a coach when you're relaying that information to the athletes?
Sure. So when I'm with my teams or with my groups at Velocity, honestly, I haven't done drop-offs with them just because of time, because we start our session at 3:00 for my soccer group because class ends at 2:50 and like guys get right to lift. Track practice starts at 3:30. So we have a half hour to be in there. So I need to get usually 10, 12 minutes warm up, 10, 15 minutes of sprints, and then we just got to get out of there because track's coming in hot. So for them, it's just whatever we have time for, which is, I would love to do more work. Hopefully when we get into the spring, we can be outside, we can just go on a field, then I'll start doing drop-offs, and then I'll kind of figure out where we go from there. But drop-offs have really been more of something I've been experimenting with myself, because I'm a big fan of experimenting on myself and figuring out how things feel for myself before I start giving it to athletes, which has its downfalls for sure. But I think in general, it's been a useful practice for me. So if I'm doing drop-offs for myself, kind of the videos I've been posting lately, I've noticed that if I'm doing that same workout alone at school, man, I can do 5, 6 sprints, then I drop off. At Velocity here with my friends, we're doing 20-yard build, 10-yard flies, so 30-yard sprints, and we had probably 8 guys going, and it was just sprint, walk back, wait for the next guy, maybe minute and a half of rest, go again, and didn't drop off. We did 15 reps, probably took 45 minutes, and we didn't drop off. So there's a big effect of environment you're in, because if you're with people who are they're not gonna drop off, you got to keep going. It's that what's that? It's that Chuck Vogelpaul video. Have you seen that guy? The West Side guy. They were doing, I think it was like Dave Tate and Chuck Vogelpaul. They were doing dynamic effort box squats, and they just didn't stop. They did like 50 sets or something because neither of them would stop going. And it's that same thing. It's like, if you're with a group who's not going to stop, like, you need to keep going. But if you're by yourself, it's a lot easier to drop off like that. So for speed work, I think it's definitely useful, but honestly, more in just of like the intention and effort aspect of, I need to keep sprinting fast because everyone else is too. Where if I'm by myself, there's a lot less incentive to sprint as fast. So I haven't really been doing them long enough or with enough people to see a physical result, other than just like, you can sprint fast and you can maintain that speed for a long time. But yeah, it's really been more of like the mental intention effect. So I'll get back to you on that one. That's kind of something I'm still working on for the sprinting, at least.
Yeah, bro, you said something perfectly there. Intent, right? If you scroll through, 2, 3, 4 videos on your Instagram, which is workhorse period training. We talked about it in the intro, but everything you're doing is with insane intent. And that's, inspiring for me when I watch it, on my way to the gym, or I watch it, before I'm going to lift. It's like, I'm thinking, okay, everything this guy does has massive intent to it. Is that something that you're telling your athletes, or is that something that just happens organically because of the environment you put yourself in?
Yeah. So that's huge for me. Like, that's pretty much everything. Like, I think that is 90% of what we're doing. And so, yeah, I got some things for this. This is where religion and philosophy of religion come in.
Yeah.
So let's get into that. So the way I think of training and the way I think of why studying religion is useful for training is because religion is a belief system with an ideal. So for a religion, we can just use Christianity, like, that's God. The ideal is God. Maybe it's Jesus as an emulation for behavior. For training and sport, the ideal is winning games, winning the national championship. There is an ideal. So then we got to figure out, in some way, how do we act in a way that emulates that ideal? If you're playing in the national championship game, maybe you're training for the national championship game, you better have the highest amount of intent and focus and effort, because that is everything. You're about to win the national championship. That is everything. That's the same idea as you're trying to emulate the ideal. You need to have every action emulate this ideal of whether it's your religion, whether it's God, whether it's the national championship. It's a similar system in that your actions have to embody what you want to achieve. So for that, that's kind of like how I've been thinking about that. Does every single exercise in this training session emulate the ideal of winning the national championship or playing professional hockey? Is there a correlation? Is this 90-90 hip thing? Is that really going to get you the national championship? I don't know, but your intention better match it, because it might. So whether it's doing something like your mobility, your speed, your strength, whatever it is, it has to have that same level of intensity of my ultimate goal, whatever that is. So that's kind of like how I think about it. Your actions have to, in some way, connect to what their output is or what their purpose is. So that's kind of like how I think about it. And then I don't give that talk to athletes. I don't start talking about God in my training sessions, but that's just how I think about it. So the way I try to get there, kind of that I said earlier, is like trying to break things. I think that's huge. I think in my video yesterday, we were just like throwing a volleyball at a wall. Like that wasn't really, it started as like a contrast for a med ball throw where you're doing like a med ball throw. And I'm like, okay, so usually with like jumps, we do a weighted jump and then an unweighted jump, and it's like potentiation and it's cool and it works. So what do we do for the med ball throw? We do a med ball throw and then a volleyball throw. And it kind of worked, but also it just like made the level of the session so much higher, because you're doing I think we paired it with like a pull-up. You're doing your pull-ups, and across the gym, you see a guy throwing a volleyball at a wall as hard as possible. And it's like loud for one, but also it's like, okay, let's go. Like there's something going on here. So every single session, we have something like that. Like I love med ball slams for that, because they're so loud. Like you just have guys trying to break the ground during the whole workout. And I don't really care about like your lat activation, like whatever the hell med ball slams do, but it's just, they're loud and they're intense and they just bring up the level of the session. So, and then that carries over. I definitely see that carry over of if you do a pull-up and a shoulder mobility exercise, you do that compared to pull-up, shoulder mobility, med ball slam, your pull-up and shoulder mobility are going to be way better because you're so much more fired up. And then we kind of get into like, should you always be completely charged up and just be super muscle and intent and try and like smash things? No. But I think with the groups I work with and the sessions I work with, that is not as much of a concern. The concern is bringing them into that mindset, when for them, maybe otherwise they'd be a little more downregulated, a little bit less ferocious and aggressive with that session. So I think for me, I definitely get a little too far into like the just work hard, intense attitude. And I can definitely bring myself down where maybe I'm doing too much volume and I kind of need to back off and just maybe take some longer rests so I can actually perform better. But with the groups I work with, I think if I can just make those sessions intense and competitive, like that's kind of my biggest goal with them. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think with the elite athletes, college level athletes, there's going to be a natural like up regulation, down regulation during the course of a session, because, you know, I don't know anybody that can stay up regulated for a full 90-minute training session and be able to repeat that multiple days in a row. Have you ever used a pocket radar for any of your med ball throws?
Yeah.
Because that fires our guys up. It changes everything.
I love doing that. Yeah. We have one. One of my baseball friends has one. So we'll bring it to the weight room and we'll use it for med ball throws and volleyball throws all the time. Yep.
And it's also like for our baseball guys, like, hey, this is working. I just like threw that way harder than I ever have, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then it also gets that competitive nature. I think the next time I do that, which would be in today's workout, I'm going to bring a couple of volleyballs out and try that contrast and get that on the pocket radar.
That's fine. Yeah.
Fire the guys up. I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. James has a group of anywhere between like 4 and 6 pro baseball guys, and the livest and loudest the gym ever gets is when they start throwing med balls. And it's always because he pulls the radar out. And it happened yesterday during a session, right? I had, I don't know, 5 or 6 athletes, and one of our baseball players is screaming at the top of his lungs, and it stops everything in the gym.
It's a 37-year-old man too.
yeah, losing his mind. 58,000 square feet of people training who stop and look to see what these, and it is so cool to be able to see. And I've never really made that connection between loud. I think I'm just kind of loud. James is just loud kind of naturally, right? But to see people who don't seem to always be loud all of a sudden, it definitely makes people think that something has to be happening in that session, and people kind of gravitate towards that. And I think that's so cool. Let's talk then a little bit about what that looks like in the weight room for the speed training. Cause again, I mentioned a couple of times, you're doing some really cool stuff and you're asking a lot of questions, which is the best part. And I think any high level professional or somebody who's really, really good at their job is going to ask a lot of questions, and a lot of times say things like, oh, I don't know, or we're trying to figure it out. Or like you mentioned earlier, I'll get back to you on that. Like, I'll let you know how it goes. Right. And that's how we know you're, a true professional and you really care and really love what you're doing. What does speed training, and put it in air quotes if we need to, look like in the weight room for you with your reactive jumps, banded jumps, the heavy deadlifts, all that, the fast concentrics, all that stuff you've been working with?
Sure. Yeah. So kind of story behind it, up until probably the summer, like this past summer, I was in that school of just sprint to get fast and then lift for strength when you're battling someone else, but also a little bit of tissue quality and trying to just hopefully protect against some injuries. And then I just got more deep into it. I started reading, I read Joel Smith's speed strength book. I watched way too many Cal Dietz videos. DAC Performance, Brady Volmering on Instagram. I got his like speed program. I got into his stuff. And then like Chris Corfist, Dan Fichter, like I got like all into that. Like I just like went deep into that for some months and just like read all their work. And then from that, then I started experimenting on myself, because I had soccer in season, so I wasn't going to do anything new with them. And then I had hockey in preseason, which was already written out, so I didn't really bother adding anything new to that. I just kind of like went with the pre-planned plan. So then for what I've been working on, I've been doing some with soccer now, with off-season or winter break hockey guys. So lower body, we'll do all kinds of jumps. So we'll go sprints first, all those sprints I talked about. And then for a typical session, let's go back to what I would do, because I'll talk about like my journey and then how I'm applying it. So what I started doing was I just kind of cut out lifting. Like I just cut out any kind of straining or heavy, because I was like, I've been going heavy since 7th grade. Like I could probably take some time off and probably won't lose a ton. Let's just try something new. So I just stopped lifting, and I would do all kinds of jumps, man. Like every single kind of jump I could think of. I would try and pair my days. So it's like my acceleration day, I would do longer contact jumps. So like weighted jumps, maybe pause jumps, maybe altitude drops. And then like, that'll be like my acceleration day, like longer contacts, maybe a little more muscle focused. My top speed day, that would be more like hurdle hops, be band accelerated jumps. That would be pogo hops, anything just like quicker contacts. And then with I call them like duration sprints, basically just like longer sprints that are hard. Then it's kind of a mix of both, because kind of just like trying to drive a bunch of volume in before the weekend. And I just cut out any kind of lifting. So my sprinting all got faster. I got like all my sprint times down. Acceleration got better. Flying 10s got better. 40 got better. Everything got better. But my vertical jump went down. I was at like a 34.9 on the jump mat. And then after probably 5-6 weeks, I was down to like a 32. So it's like a little difference, like not a ton, but it was like multiple 32s where I was like definitely down a little bit. And then over this winter, when I'm back home at the Velocity here, been adding more lifting. I've been doing some front squats, some trap bar deadlifts, some cleans. So like a little more like compression, more little strength, vertical jumps back up. So now it's like back up to where it was before. Sprinting's still there. I can't do as long of sprints because we're indoors now, but my 20-30 yard sprints, same thing. So that was something where I noticed where it's like, okay, I take out the strength and the strain, my vertical jump goes down, I add it back in, vertical jump goes up, but is a vertical jump really a useful measure? Like that's what I'm still working on. I don't know, because the impulse is so long. It's like, are you really going to see that exact time motion in sports? Maybe it's just a useful measuring tool to kind of track where you are. So yeah, that's kind of where I was with all of my speed training. And then with the athletes I work with now it's just kind of like implementing it piece by piece. We'll do different kinds of jumps. You talk about like doing all the banded jumps, like band resisted jumps to force yourself to get off the ground quicker, band accelerated jumps. That's just like where you hang bands from the ceiling. It's like Cal Dietz's thing where you just like trampoline jumps that are more fun to call them. So we'll pair those a ton. I love pairing those with any kind of strength work, just because I feel like one, strength work for my populations is pretty boring, honestly. Like some guys want to lift heavy, but for the most part, just kind of like get it out of the way. So if we do a trap bar deadlift, we'll definitely pair it with some kind of jump, probably a reactive jump, a measured jump, just something that like kind of is more athletic, more expressive. And that's the same idea as that med ball slam idea. You do a med ball slam with the strength work gets better just through intention. And then kind of my recent experiment lately has just been trying to figure out how you do this for upper body, because lower body is kind of easy, I think. Like you just do some jumps. You do all of your reactive jumps, short contact, long contact, bounds, single leg, like jumps, easy. For upper body, it's a little more complicated, or it's a little less obvious, at least, because for most of my training experience, it was just do med ball throws, maybe some dynamic effort bench, and plyo push-ups, which are cool things. Like I use those things with athletes. I use them for myself. But like let's get a little more in depth, a little more creative. So I got like drop catches. So we got a dumbbell. We'll do the curl's the easy one. So I got a barbell right here. Drop it, relax my elbow, trying to completely flex my bicep or my tricep, come back up, catch it. So you're trying to relax, contract, same idea as when you're sprinting. One muscle's got to turn off, next muscle to turn on. The faster you can relax and contract while you're still applying enough force, you're gonna go faster. So that's what I was thinking about. It's like, how can we basically create upper body plyometrics? And that was one way. It was drop catches. Okay, so that's level one. So we got drop catches of doing like a shoulder one. I'm like, okay, so got a shoulder one. What else could we do for this? For a lower body exercise, we would do say something like stiff leg bounce. So we're doing like alternating single leg bounce as fast as possible. What could we do that for upper body? What if we do a lateral raise, but instead of just doing drop catches, we're going maybe more like muscle based, trying to like stop the weight, we just go as fast as possible. So basically like a co-contraction where it's like bring your arm down by your side, back up as fast as possible. You look so stupid doing it. It's hilarious to make guys do this because you're just like flapping your arms like a bird. But I've noticed like one of my baseball friends I was talking about, he did this kind of training with me for 8 weeks. He did this like normal pitching workouts, but same thing for him. He stopped lifting. He only did the speed work. His fastball went up like 3 or 4 miles per hour. So it's like, maybe there's something there, maybe. So that's one thing. It's like, so we have drop catches. I call those rapid reps. So you're just going as fast as possible back and forth. Rapid reps, drop catches, and then you can just keep going. Let's say for lower body, we do overcoming ISOs. For upper body, we do like a bench press overcoming ISO. What if we do like shoulder overcoming, curl overcoming? Like you can just be creative. So I've just been trying to figure out which things work, which things are worth implementing with athletes, which things are safe enough. Risk versus reward. That was a fun Instagram conversation I had. It was on this. I posted a video of barbell skull crush drop catches, which are exactly what they sound like. But we were like dropping it like above our heads. So, like if we miss the bar, it's just gonna like drop behind your head. And someone commented risk versus reward, not seeing it here. And it turned into this like a bunch of people like jumped in. Like it went kind of like a little bit viral. So like the algorithm got it a little bit. So people like jumping in. It turned like 100 comment argument about risk versus reward in training. It was amazing.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. It's basically just be creative with the upper body and then do all kinds of jumps for lower body. And then I'm still undecided about the band. What do you call them? Like the AFSM, like the band kicks, like the easy ones, like the hamstring ones, where you're just like kicking as fast as possible. I'm unsure about those. Like the idea makes sense where it's turn off, turn on as fast as possible, work on that. But is it fast enough? I don't know. Is it even similar enough to the mechanism of sprinting? I don't know. So I'm still working on that one. That's kind of like
loud for sure. It's loud
for
sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. It's not loud in like the fun way that med ball slam is. It's loud and that like everyone looks at you like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like, so it's not the same kind of loud where it's like energizing loud. It's just like annoying loud. So we're working on that one. I don't know about that yet.
See a lot of baseball guys do it with their arms extended in a band or to the side. Yeah, and that's similar. That's kind of like one of those turn your head's not super dialed into what's going on, but it's loud and maybe you should stop doing that. Or
it's not something I've incorporated with my guys yet. I just don't know enough about it.
I know, and I appreciate that. And it's never any of your guys who I see doing it, right? We also have a guy who does basically like landmine presses, but slams the plate that's on the landmine into the rack. And it's another thing where it's like, all right, bro, that's a bit too, and it's the steel plate, so it's real loud. He's slamming it, and he's, you know, and he's a college thrower, very talented, you know, shot putter. So maybe something's there. But that always makes me laugh when I see him doing that. So where do you think this kind of these things that you're messing around with training, right? Where you're trying to figure out if they work, trying to figure out if they don't work, take some stuff that does work, lose the stuff that doesn't. Where do you think that goes next? Like what does the evolution kind of look like for you? Is it maybe applying it more into the team training setting instead of the individualized training, or where do you see yourself kind of continuing to experiment with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely just apply with larger groups. Because I mean, I'll do that a little bit. Like if I have something that works on me, works on some the individual clients I work with, then I'll bring it to a larger group. So yeah, it's definitely just trying to figure out what I can bring to a team setting that is effective enough, but is also it would work in a team setting. Like, is this going to work with a 30-guy soccer team in a weight room? So I think that is the next progression, is just try to bring it to the teams and the larger groups. But yeah, and also just trying to make sure it also fits with our goals of like that mental intention side. Because if you can program it, you can say do shoulder rapid reps, and if you don't really know why, or if it's just not really fitting with the rest of the session in terms of kind of like, you know, the vibe of it, honestly, is like, does it just not fit with the rest of it? It's just not going to work. Because if you're not doing those kind of exercises with absolute maximum intention on doing it perfectly, you're probably better off doing a lateral shoulder raise. So that's kind of where I'm figuring out is, one, what's effective, and then how I'm actually going to sell this to a group to actually have them do it correctly with enough intention. So yeah, it's just larger scale, figure out what works.
That's a great point. I have some stuff like that I mess around with, and in the college that I'm at, I can do it with the football players, because no matter what we give them, they're gonna love it and they're gonna get after it. And then, you know, we'll have the women's lacrosse team come in, and I'll be super fired up because the last session would have been so great. And then women's lacrosse comes in and just start going through the motions, and it's not, nobody's loud, nobody's making any noise, nobody's competing. And that, I think, is the hard part for me to balance, is sitting there as a coach saying, I mean, come on now, you know, I'll say like, oh, that was good, but now do it like you care, or that was good, but like try harder, you know, like little things like that. And sometimes, you know, that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then that gets frustrating for me, because I think, you know, why isn't it as cool when this team does it compared to when this team does it? So that definitely is a fun thing to kind of mess around with. You mentioned Joel Smith a little earlier, and this conversation came up when we were talking to him, but we kind of look at training and programming on a spectrum a little bit of, you know, one far absolute is everything is programmed, every set and rep, every rest period, every day is programmed, right? The perfect 12-week cycle that peaks you for one day of maxing out, right? And then on the far other end of the spectrum is everything being super intuitive, right? You come in, you feel the energy, you see how the kids dealt with the blizzard on their way in, right? You see that they're having their hoodies on for a little longer, and then you kind of develop training intuitively around what you think is going to give the athlete the most bang for the buck at the time. Where do you kind of lie? And because a lot of the stuff that you do seems very planned out when you know, you follow what you're doing on Instagram, but where does that all lie on that spectrum of being super written down and being super hyper focused on going in one direction, and then also being super intuitive, where if a game of spike ball is giving you what you want out of the training session, you would stay in that longer? Where do you sit on that line?
I'm definitely closer towards the structured, have a plan side. Like, I'm definitely closer to that spectrum, partly just because I don't have enough confidence in myself to like come into a session with no program written out, or like a very loosely program written out, and be able to improvise and adapt and create an effective enough session to actually get my goals or get the team's goals achieved. So that's one thing, is just like, I don't think I'm at the point in my life yet where I'm willing to just like surrender to that and just be okay with that unknown, because I'm kind of still working on that. And then just because I'm with sports teams, like we're on a schedule, so we know what our next game is. So like there has to be some level of organization of like, we have a game in 5 days. I have these 3 goals I want to get done today. Let's just do those. And then that's where like the creativity comes in of, if you have a situation like bad weather, I don't even know, something's going on. Maybe, or a good example was with soccer, the World Cup was last month. Like that threw a wrench in our program because the guys wanted to watch World Cup games. And so if I have a lift at 3:00 and the game ends at 3:30, like I talked about earlier, that track is available from 3 to 3:30. So I could say everyone has to be at the weight room, or everyone has to be at the track, like just don't watch the game. But then they're going to show up there and be pissed off, looking on their phones every time they get a water break. So that's the kind of thing where it's like, just be creative and be able to adapt. But that's where the specific versus general discussion is, where like the specifics of this exact exercise is not the same thing as the general goal of the exercise. Where if I can be very clear with myself and like know what the actual purpose of this session or what the purpose of this exercise is, it's going to be much easier to adapt the session to match that same goal. So if I want to have some kind of 1v1 defending drill, but the drill I wrote isn't working and no one likes it, being able to like think on the spot of like, what's a different kind of drill I can use? Could I do something where it's more of a chase? Could I do something where you're chasing something? Maybe it's a 2v2, maybe it's a 2v1. Like, it's being able to change the specifics in light of the actual general goal, which I think I always have like a general goal of something. So it's not so much of like I'm always intuitively changing and just kind of like flowing of what feels right in the moment. It's I have my session planned out with its main goals. Keep those main goals intact. Those probably aren't going to change, but being able to change the specifics in light of the context of whatever the hell's going on to still fit with that same general goal. So probably closer towards structured, but being able to draw from the more intuitive, creative side is just how life works. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I oftentimes wish I was a bit more structured, but I think I was so structured for so long that, I kind of just got like bored with it maybe. And I've also seen a lot of really good, and again, this comes from James, who's taught me a ton about, just training and culture and perspective and all these kind of things. But I've seen the benefit of switching things up pretty consistently for at least the college athlete, where I spend most of my time during the school years is at a local Division II school. And I could be structured and do the same thing, because we have a lot of our athletes who will come back in the summer and say, yeah, man, every Monday we clean, every Wednesday we deadlift, every Friday we squat, 12 months a year. Right. And so there's got to be some reason that coach is doing that. Right. Some numbers and metrics have to be getting, moving in the correct direction for them to do that. But I get bored as a coach. I get bored as an athlete. And I've had a lot of success in building cultures where athletes come into the gym and they don't know what's going to hit them. They don't know, maybe the sets and reps. They'll know some similar exercises for 3 weeks or whatever, but they don't know the sets and reps. And I've had some success there. And so I can't get myself back to that where I'm super, super structured. And I don't know, James, if you have any, thoughts on that, but that's kind of where I'm at. And I think it's a good thing right now, but I may change my mind down the road.
Yeah, and I think we tend to look at our own training that we're practicing with more of a negative lens and more of a constructive criticism lens that we look at what we're doing. So we always kind of lean to well, what could I be doing better? Well, maybe it's going back to structure, but you tend to also forget about all the reps that you've learned over the years practicing being a strength coach that's helped you create frameworks and schemes to operate off of. So you're always coming in with a plan and with intentions, which then lets you deviate from that main structure if you need to, or stay into that main scheme because it's still working. So I think what it does is it's just you're having a plan either way, but you're allowing yourself to be flexible from that plan based on how you're reading body languages and how you're reading the room or whatever team comes in. And, I think some of the things that people start to pick up on, and we've had conversations about this, is everybody's running almost the same scheme for me during a week, regardless of the sport we play. And there's going to be differences in those individual workouts because the time of day is different. The gym environment's different. What else is going on in the gym at that time? So I think it's not falling in love with one or the other. I think it's being able to adapt between the two. And if we don't have that base framework to operate off of, then we are just going to be shooting at a moving target all the time. But if we have that base framework with the intentions behind what we're trying to do, that allows us to navigate the unpredictable factors that change based on, is it finals week? Yeah. Is this World Cup going on? Right. So I think we tend to think, oh, I don't have a plan, but just because it's not a written out program for each individual team doesn't mean there isn't a plan there.
And definitely there are, like Lachen mentioned, there's the athlete who doesn't want that. Oh, it's all good. You can just run, run this program. This will keep you a little more structured. You'll be able to track your stuff a little easier. So I think being able to kind of flow in and out of that is pretty important as well. A couple more things for you, bro. I don't want to take up the rest of your morning, but every team needs a workhorse. You say it. It's the fourth line on your Instagram, dude. I think it's so cool. What does that mean to you when you write that up there? What do you think about?
Yeah, that's a story from when I was younger. That's when I think probably 5th or 6th grade. That was when I was in that training period of just do hard things because I don't really know what I'm doing. We had like a youth hockey workout where we basically just like went to the rink weight room, and some of the dads were just like having us do some body weight stuff, and we had like free time, and I just got a sandbag, put it on my shoulders, and just started walking up the stairs, like down and up the stairs, because it was hard. I was like, all right, I guess this is something. And one of my friend's dads saw me doing that, and he just said, every team needs a workhorse. I was like, yeah, that's right, I agree. And so I just like always had that in my head, like every team I'm on, like I gotta be the one working the hardest. And so like probably a lot of strength coaches, that's kind of how I came up, is just work hard and get where you are now. And now working hard is like the ideal. It's just work as hard as you can. Who cares how skilled you are? So that's kind of where that story comes from. But now it's like, it's not ironic, but it's more of just like a symbol. It's not so much of like what it means, because I've realized it's not always the guy who just works hard, puts his head down and works, who does the best in sports. It's probably the one who's good at the sport. So so now I'm thinking more of like, what does workhorse actually mean? And now it's more of a symbol for, yes, working hard and that intention side and actually putting everything into the session, but also being able to be open-minded and be receptive to new ideas. Because it's not just work hard and that's the only thing you have. It's also think and also try to figure out what you're lacking at, and be willing to work hard in different ways. Maybe it's working hard by being vulnerable and trying this new sports skill and working with a teammate on this. Like maybe that's your version of working hard. So it's more of a symbol now. And I think it's funny because I said I like Tony Holler, and a lot of time he tweets out like, be a racehorse, not a workhorse. And I always think that's funny because it feels like he's calling me out, but he's not. It's funny. Yeah. So that's like the story where it comes from. But now it's more of a symbol of just kind of like reminding me of where I come from and like what my background is, but also kind of a reminder to keep pushing forward and keep thinking forward and keep trying new things and keep trying to better myself. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I mean, we see it every Sunday when you watch an NFL game. You see it every time you turn on highlights of an NBA game, right? There's a player on that field or on that team who's willing to dive for the loose balls, who's willing to, put their body out there on the line, and probably making way more money than people ever told them they'd be able to make in sports, because they didn't have the skill, but they had that same workhorse mentality that they said that, they were not going to be outworked. They were going to do everything that they could do in their ability to be able to, give back to the team. And they may not be the best jump shooter, but you're going to need a guy to box out and do the dirty things to be able to help your team win. And I mean, it's awesome to kind of focus on that group of people, because not everybody is going to be the leading scorer, right? Like every once in a while we get somebody into the gym who you can tell is just a different level of athlete, right? It's like, okay, these guys, we could probably simplify this dude's training. They don't need to do that much. This girl is so elite at her sport. Yeah, we'll just kind of, get her through and do whatever, and she'll have success either way. But there's always going to be some of those athletes. And we tend to find those athletes in these kind of private sectors too, who are willing to go out and find us and look for the best coaches, somebody who's willing to put them in tough situations and work through a lot of, tough times, because they know that's what's going to get them onto the field. And that's such a cool perspective to have. So final question, man, to wrap up, what do you think we're missing in the industry? I know we touched on a lot of different things. I got a full page of notes here, but is there a few things or one thing specifically that you think we as strength coaches are missing in the industry?
I think kind of we talked about earlier, I think that idea of just competition and finding ways to bring competition into sessions to mimic the intensity of actual sport. It's not always the way to go. Like sometimes you just need to do a session where maybe you're focusing on more tissue quality, or focus on mobility, or maybe it's even meditation. Like there are times where it's not the best idea to do a rank, record, publish test of something and a med ball throw. Like there are times where it's not the best idea to do that. But I think at least in the off season, like every session, I think should mimic the intensity of the sport you're about to play, not in terms of exertion and like actual fatigue, but just the mental attention of the same level you are in a game. And the way you achieve that, I think, is through one, competition, trying to beat someone else at what they care about. And then two, just trying to record something, trying to have some kind of measure that you're trying to break every session. Like every session should have something where you're recording something and ranking them and just having something to compete for. So that's one thing, is just realizing what we're actually training for, and not only mimicking the physical qualities, but mimicking the mental qualities as well in that training session. And then the way you get there, I think, is through that different lens approach of thinking beyond the physical and the body, and thinking about the mind, and thinking about how philosophy comes in and how we can actually connect this session to what we care about. Because for a lot of athletes, they don't really care about the weight room. Like, also, why should they care about the weight room? It's not what they play their sport for. They earn the weight room to get better through sport. If the connection between weight room and sport is not visible, you're going to have a lot lower level of intention. If you can make that connection more clear, either through honest communication or just through that level of intensity and that level of compete, that connection is going to be much more obvious. You're going to get a much better effort from the athlete, and they're going to be more consistent with what they do. So yeah, make your sessions competitive.
Heck yeah. And I guess this is the final question, man. What's going on out there in Minnesota? Because you got a lot of dudes making some really big changes, at least in our mind, man, in the industry. Is there's something out there, something in the water, something in the snow that you know what I mean, is bringing all you guys together and hopefully changing training for the better?
I think it is the snow. I think it's being so cold. It's like, we got to figure this out. One, you got to be indoors a lot more. You got to be in the weight room more. So you got to like think of new things to do in here. But also, it's like, I mean, I can just show you guys, like, look at this. This is not somewhere people should be living. We should not be living here. We got to figure this out. We got to make something of our lives. So that's what it is. The cold, the snow.
Yeah, man. And you're on a podcast that literally the first title of the name is Cutoffs, and you're in 3 or 4 layers.
Right. Yeah. I can't even represent. I'm sorry.
Man, when Jochum was on the podcast, he said the same thing. He's like, bro, it's like 20 degrees out. He's like, he's in tons of layers. So man, there definitely is something going on. If somebody wants to find more about you, man, they love the conversation, they want some more of your content, where can they find you online?
Yeah. Workhorse.training on Instagram. I have a Twitter, but I don't really do anything on it, so don't bother trying to find it. Yeah, workhorse.training. I try to post some new ideas, try to post some fun videos. And then I also got some programs if you want to try out the training I do. I got racehorse program, which is all that sprint training. There's really no lifting in it. It's just all kinds of speed work, upper body speed work, lower body speed work, jumps, drop catches. It's just all the speed work I've been doing for the past few months combined into one small program. And there's Operation Athlete, which has lifting. So that's basically speed work, jumping, lifting, strength. That's pretty much everything together. So I got those 2 programs, but yeah, other than that, reach out. We can talk about anything. Training, let's go.
Heck yeah. Thanks so much, man, for being on the podcast. Everybody who has been with us and is listening, we appreciate y'all's support. We appreciate y'all listening. Feel free to share this episode, because there's so much good information here. I know I'm going to go back through my notes, listen to it 3 or 4 times just to get, everything out of the conversation. Thanks again, Coach, for being on, man. This has been awesome. Episode 56, 3 things we ask at the end of every episode. 1, tell the people that you love them. 2, practice gratitude. Please continue to do that. Number 3, we got one life to live. You might as well live this life stimulated. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you on the next one.